Welcome back, guys. Hope you're doing great. It's Vitri here. So, in modern React application, performance are really matters, right? So, user don't want to wait for the entire applications or all the data to load at once. Well, in this video, we are going to discuss about the concepts like lazy loading pages with suspense fallbacks, and we are going to discuss about the infinite scrolling, right? And most importantly, we are going to do it all by using a simple and clean custom hook architecture, right? So, so far in this React series, we've been discussed quite a lot of stuff. So if you haven't watched any of those videos, click on the top right corner. You can see that the link. You can a tag, click that, and go ahead and watch the complete React series, right? So without wasting your time, let's jump into the video now. So I already do have the React application. So let me close everything. Get back over here into the main.jsx. And I'm gonna simply hide these two. And I'm going to create one more stuff, one more custom component for this. Let's keep this as infinite scrolling example, something like this. Okay. Now here inside the container, I'm gonna create myself a new file called infinite scrolling example.jsx. All right, now here I'm gonna simply say RAFCE infinite scrolling example, and let me import that infinite scrolling example over here. So this is how it looks. Perfect, which we want, right? Now we already do have a custom hook which we discussed in the previous sections. Like this is the custom hook which we designed over here, right? So normally this particular use fetch custom hook is used for a single API calls, right? But when you're discussing the infinite scroll concept, it's not just about fetching, it's about pagination and appending the data. So instead of modifying the use fetch, we will composite this into a more powerful hook. Okay. So yeah, basically this custom hook includes the fetching the data. That's the most important point because we are using the fetch function. Then we are using the about controller also that is also really needed for cleaning up and for safe unmounting as well as, right? So we don't want to, we will not touch this code. Let's leave this as it is, but we will create one more custom hook, right? So we will create one more custom hook because it's already doing a very good job. What is it? It's just simply fetching the data, right? So we will composing what we are going to do is we are going to create an infinite scroll infinite post as a custom hook, basically where we are going to do the page tracking and accumulating the results and all those stuff. By using this use fetch, we are going to put it into the another custom hook to all those to do all those stuff, right? So it will make sense when you start doing something. So if you're not watching, if you haven't watched the previous sections and everything, please pause this code and you can write it by yourself, or please go ahead and watch that playlist completely, or please go and watch the custom hook sections so you can understand why we designed this use fetch and everything, what is about controller and how does this returning the data and every stuff. Basically this use fetch expects the URL, and we have the about controller to pause or stop the use fetch if the user wants to close it, and based on the signal it will be terminate the data fetching. Apply the URL into fetch, you will get the response, and we will assign the data into your local state. Then if the user abort the data fetch, it will throws an error called abort error. Except this particular error, we are going to display that error in the console. If that error is not being triggered, then it is going to console the error, whatever the error is being triggered, it will be displayed. If no error is being there, finally it is going to close the controller, then it is going to return the data what we have in our hand. That's the custom hook which we designed. So here I'm going to create one more custom hook called use infinite post, something like this, post.js post. All right. So here let's import certain things. Import like let's say import react from react. We can import that one. Then right after here I'm going to get the use fetch hook which we designed from use fetch. Then right after here, I'm gonna create a custom hook called use infinite posts is equals to an arrow function. Basically, inside over here, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to collect the page number, what page number it is going to be. So let's bring the use state. So const page set page is equals to react dot use state of 1. Okay, either you can import the use state as directly over here, like simply you can import it like this use state, so you don't have to say react dot use state. If you don't do that, I can keep the react instance itself. Based on that, I can access the rest of the stuff. Then right after here, I'm going to create a custom hook, which is going to be const post set post is equals to react dot set use state. Okay, which is going to be an empty array itself. And finally, right after here, I'm going to collect the data. Const data is equals to use that custom hook, use fetch. So we are going to use this JSON placeholder API, this one, the one that we are going to use. If you scroll all the way to bottom, you can see this is the API. So I'm going to copy this API, bring the dynamic string literals and put it inside. Okay, then basically we are going to use the post over here, right? So this is the post API that we are going to use. This is the API. So what is it going to be? Slash post. So I'm going to say slash post. Then we need to set up the pages, how many pages that we are going to load. Then we need to set up the limit, what limit that we are going to set up. So right after here, I'm simply going to say question mark underscore page is equals to dollar page. Then ampersand underscore limit, which is equals to what is the page limit. By default, I'm going to set it into 20. Okay, that's the page limit that we are setting over here. Okay, so it will fetch the data with that certain limit, and it will be assigned as the pages every time. Whenever we are load more, keep on loading it, the new pages stuff will be keep on adding into it. Then now we have the data in our hand, so I'm going to bring the use effect hook. So let's get the react dot use effect hook, open it, supply two different parameters into it. One is a function and another one is the dependency injection. Based on the data changes, this use effect needs to keep re-render. So if I do have the data in my hand, then only I need to set the post. Set post is equals to, I need to extract all the previous post as it is, and you need to return as an array. So you open the square bracket. We need to bring all the previous data, whatever we do have in that array. Along with that, we need to destructure the data as an object into this particular array, because data is also an array. So we are destructuring a new array into the basically we are destructuring the data array into this particular array what we are creating over here. So what this line indicates is, because if you already have some data, think about it, you are already holding some 20 objects as an array inside your post. You need to keep that 20 and you need to bring the new array also. So basically what you have in your hand is an array, and what you're receiving is also an array. So we are creating a temporary array over here, and we are destructuring that array completely as an objects list of objects into this new array, and same goes for the new array as well as. Okay, so that is what happening over here. All right, so now this is then finally this custom hook is going to return some data. So let's open it, and I need to return the post. Then I need to return one more function called load more. This is the custom function which we are creating. It's going to be an arrow function, and here you need to update the page. So set page is equals to access the previous page. Then we need to simply say previous plus 1. This is the function, right? So this is called hook compositions. Instead of bloating one hook, we combine the small, like what is it, two different smaller hooks, or more than two different smaller hooks. We are basically combining the smaller hooks with the another hook. So that's called, like, what is a hook composition. Okay, so now like what we are going to do is we are going to create an infinite scroll observer. Okay, so we are going to create an infinite scroll observer. Instead of listening to the scroll events, we use this intersection observer API, right? It's the most powerful and the most accurate. So normally if you're searching for infinite scroll in online, most of them they will use the infinite scroll event by using the use effect. But here we are going to use the intersection observer API. Okay, I will show you what does that mean. Don't worry about that. So here, all you have to do is create one more custom hook, which is going to be use infinite scroll.js. Okay. So use infinite post is just for what? For based on that page numbers and limit, we are going to refetch the data. Infinite scroll is for handling that events, scrolling and all those events, right? But we are not going to use the listener events. We are going to use the intersection observer. Okay. Just like the usual, let's bring this import React from React. That's what we needed. We need the use state and the use effect. We know what's the purpose of the both use state and the use effect. Then we have to create the custom hook over here. Okay, so I will explain the code once we finish writing it. So let me write the code first. So export const use infinite scroll is equals to, here this function is going to get a reference of that function on load more, which we have the load more function over here, right? So basically it's going to get that reference over here, and here I'm going to create a reference. Const reference is equals to react dot use reference, open it. Initially it's going to be null. Okay, so then right after here, all right, sorry guys. Okay, so we have the use reference and everything. So right after here, I'm going to get the use effect. So react dot use effect, open it, bring an arrow function as the first parameter, come on, and the array injection dependency injections as the second parameter. Okay, so inside the dependency injections, we're gonna give that on load more function as the reference as for the dependency injections. This use effect needs to render every time whenever there's changes on that particular function reference. Okay, now we have to create that what to say, that observer, right? So let's say const handle observer is equals to new intersection observer, open it, and here you have to get a callback function. Okay, and you have to submit one more options. What are the options that you have to supply to this? So here I'm going to get an array. Inside that array I'm going to get that entries, all the list of entries. So here what we have to do is, all right, so where okay, so we created this entry. Okay, so basically this intersection observer, like it's like a browser side effect function. Like mostly it will run after the render, like after the component render. So that ensures the DOM elements exits before observing, right? So because if you don't have that particular last reference element inside the page, it's not going to trigger that the next set of data. It's not going to trigger that API, right? So we need to make sure that the last reference of that limit that needs to be present in the screen, then only we can fetch the next sets of data. So that's why we are using the intersection observer. Okay, so now we collected the entry, and here I need to check the condition if the entry dot is intersecting. All right, so if the entry dot is intersecting, if it is intersecting, then what we need to do, we need to load more. So on load more, call that function reference. It is going to trigger that next that load more function. So it is going to fetch the new sets of data in it. Then right after here, inside here, I'm just going to say threshold. So threshold is going to be 1. Okay, so that's what we need to do. And right after here, what we need to do is we need to set that reference. So handle observer dot observe this reference dot current. Okay, Then finally we need to clean it up properly. So return is equals to, I'm just going to say handle observer dot disconnect, open it. Okay, this is the method of the intersection interface. Stop the observer watching that particular targeted element. Okay, right after, at the end, all we have to do is to simply return the reference. All right, so basically what we did over here is this is the intersection observer that we're using, right? That's the browser API functions. Like, it detects when the elements enters or leaves that particular viewport point. Okay, it's much better than the scroll event listeners. So because the scroll listener events, or when it compared to the performance wise, it's literally heavy, and this is the modern way to implement the infinite scroll. Okay, then we have that observer callback. So we have this observer callback function, right? So this observer callback function receives two different parameters. One is going to the entries and another one is going to be observer itself. Entries is an array, so that's why we are collecting the entry in an array. So we only care about the first observed element, so that's why we are collecting that first entry over here. Okay, so this is equivalent to what? So instead of collecting so if you're not collecting it as an array, what we do, we will collect the entries completely. Then inside the entries, we used to get the first entry, something like this. From the entries, I need to access the first array. So instead of doing something like this, we access the first index of the array directly from that. So that simplifies by avoiding one more line over there. So to avoid this, we returned it something like this. Okay, so once we collected the first entry, we need to make sure that it is whether it is intersecting or not. If it is inside the viewport, then we just have to trigger the load mode, right? So that's what we are doing over there. So intersecting, it's basically, it's a Boolean value. If it is true, which means that the element is inside the viewport, right? So, and this on load more is the function which is basically coming from where? From here. This is the reference will be passed over here. So we are calling that function. All right. So and then finally we have this, the second parameter of this intersection observer, which is going to be your options. Those are the threshold options. This is the basically the threshold. These values, it's just between 0 and 1. 1 means callback, like what is it, fires only when 100% of that element is visible, right? So 1 in the sense, it have only two different values only, 0 and 1s. 1 means callback fires only when the 100% of elements is visible inside the viewport. Okay, so basically the common values are 0, 0.5 and 1. 0 means trigger only. 0.5 means half of the values are visible inside the viewport, and 1 means 100% of the values are visible inside the viewport. Okay, so we need to display only all the 100% of elements being completely scrolled, and after that you will get that visible targeted pinpoint. Once you reach that point, it needs to trigger the next sets of data. That's why we are using this threshold as 1. Okay, and finally we just need to disconnect it. That's why we are cleaning up the function inside the return statement. Then we are simply returning the reference from this use hook, infinite scroll hook, to in order to use it inside the another component, because we need that reference, right? Now let's jump into the API UI part. Here I'm gonna, here let's create a new folder called posts. All right, so inside this post, let's create the post list.jsx. Yep, and RAFCE, and let's say post list. All right, so let's go ahead and load this post list where it is. Close this, close this, close this, and let me bring that post list over here, which is going to render that post list. And for this, let's add some, let's say flex 1, and space y is equals to, basically it's going to be 4. All right, so what we can do is mm, mm, mm. let's keep this for the time being, and let's add some padding as well as. And now let's jump into the post list over here. So first I need to collect the posts and all those things. So let's get that post. So const. So from the use infinite posts, what is the name we used for that? Hooks, use infinite posts, copy this and paste it. Use infinite posts, make sure that it's been imported from there. Then from here, I need to access the two different values which we return. One is going to be post and another one is going to be the load more. Then right after here, we need to get that reference. So of the last post reference is equals to, you need to use that use infinite scroll. Okay, we can't see that in the suggestions. Where it is, get this, copy this, use this, import it, and I need to get that load more. Send this load more function reference to the infinite scroll reference so that it will be passed over here. So you will get the reference of the last post. That's the last post reference. Save it. Okay, so we are ran into some issue. What is that? Console. So we are getting this error. Fail to execute observer on. Okay, so we are getting an error over here at this point. Do we made any mistakes? Okay, so initially the reference that it is going to be null only. So I'm just going to, I missed the command. So if the reference, okay, let's write if I don't have the reference dot current, I just have to return it. Yep, now it will be working, because initially when the component is being mounted, this reference will be empty. So it needs to be returned. So if you refresh this, you should be able to see that post list without any errors over here, which is working perfectly as it's supposed to be now. All right, so next what we need to do is we have those data and everything in our hand, and now we have to render those data. So here I'm gonna bring that data, post.map, open it. We will access the post. We will access the post along with this index as well as post and the index of that particular post. Then open it and render that by using the div. Then here I need to supply the key. Basically the key is going to be the post.id itself. Then inside over here we are going to render that post body, right? So inside this division I'm going to bring that h3 tag where we are going to render that post dot title. Then bring a paragraph tag and we are going to render the post dot body. If you are not sure why we are using the body and title and everything, that is simply from the JSON data. See, we have the title and we have the body of it. Perfect. All right, so save this now. Oh my goodness, you should be able to see something over here, right? We need to just make some customizations in the styles and everything. And here currently it's fetching the, let's bring it, the console log. Let's see, console.log and post list rendered. Let me give you the post dot length. What is the length of it? If I inspect the elements console and if I refresh it, you should be able to see we are getting the 20 different posts. But once it's reached that threshold, it needs to re-render. It needs to refetch the again the next sets of data, right? So in order to do that, what you have to do is you have to bring here that what we can say, the reference. If it is a last one, then we need to bring that last post reference. If it is not a last one, then we need to keep it as a null one. So how to figure it out whether it is a last one or it's not a last one? So for that particular reason only, we have what we have to do is inside this paths, this is the place where we are rendering the map stuff, right? So yeah, this stuff, right? Keep it empty. Instead of directly rendering the values, I'm going to bring the function parameter here, and I'm going to make sure whether it's a last index or not. If it is a last post, how? If the index is equals to post dot length minus 1, which means whatever the length it is, 10 or something. So the index number on an array, if it is 10, the last index will be 9 only, because it will starting from the value of the 0th index. So by this way we can figure it out whether it is a last index or not. So if that says so, and finally I just have to return the values what I want to render it, paste that. This is the stuff that we want to render inside the right. And here I'm just going to supply the reference. If it is a last post, then supply the last post reference. Otherwise keep that reference as a null itself. So once you have the last post reference, it is going to trigger that API and it's going to fetch the new sets of data, right? So we are inside the last post. So if I scroll it, you can see it's giving 0 0 0 initially because it's 0 only, and finally it's been fetched, so you're getting the data as 20. And once I scroll to the end, you can see it's fetching the next sets of data. All right, so which means it's fetching and it's displaying the data count and everything. Maybe if you adjust the UI stuff a little bit, you can see the real the way how it's been working. So what we can do is, for this we can make some little bit styles over here. Class name, maybe we can add some border effect, and border gray it's going to be 200, and we can add some paddings as well as. Okay, then we can say rounded medium, save it, and this all being rendered inside here. So space y it's not working, so what we can do is flex column, okay, and gap it's equals to 4. Still it's not taking the gap. Oops, my bad. It should not be returned over here. It needs to be, all these things needs to be returned inside this division. Class name, which is going to be space y, it's going to be 4. Now you have some space, and for this what we can do is relative, and right after here I can bring a division, class name, position as an absolute position from the top 2 and the right side as 2 itself. I can bring and display the index, whatever the index it is, it's let's plus 1 because it will start from the 0, so plus 1, that will make sense. Font semi bold, save it. Okay, now you have that index as well as, so it's displaying once the 20 is reached inside, it is going to fetch the next sets of data. Okay, okay, there is some issue now. All right, so it took me some time to figure out what's the mistakes over here is. So basically what is working correctly is, before talking about the complete issues, let's confirm what is working, right? So we know that page states its increments, use fetch is also working properly, and intersection is also fired properly, and load more is called, and it's fetched the first 20 posts correctly. So the problem is not the pagination or not the observer, it not the state update the syntax as well as. So the real issue of this root cause is intersections keeps triggering continuously for the same sets of elements. Once the last post it's being visible, so entry dot this entry dot is intersecting is going to be true. So on load more function is called, so the page is get incremented, but the observer is still observing the same elements only. it needs to trigger it needs to immediately trigger again. So this caused the rapid pages increments. So the results, so the requests, it's keep on overlapping or aborted, something like that. So the use fetch cannot settles correctly, right? So to net this effect, so what we have to do is, so the next page never properly appends the next page data. It's not appending the properly. So why, basically why it is happening in our code, like what we are, where we are observing the code in the post left post reference, here, right? So this is a correct approach only, but here we never unobserve the previous last element. So for this issue we have to make some modifications. So where it is getting keep on triggering the multiple times, it's triggering the multiple times at this point over here. So every time whenever there is a changes on your layout, or every time whenever there is a changes on your post, or every time when you're loading this, it's keep on triggering multiple times. So that's why it couldn't append the next sets of data properly over there. There is no time changes over here. And we are not using the loading guard also, so we need to use the loading guard as well, as because we never use any loading states or something like that over here. Okay, and yeah, we need to make few customizations over here. So we have to fix the observer triggers repeatedly. Then we need to fix the loading guard. Then we need to fix the same element observed issue. And we need to check also the empty also, because once it's reached the empty, we need to check that also. We haven't checked that well, that thing stuff as well as. So let's go ahead and make some customizations in the code as well as. So let's jump into the use fetch first. So if there is any changes that we have to do, we have to do it in the use fetch as well as. So we collected the data, then controller is there, fetching, everything is fine. So that basically it's just fetching it, so no issues over there. We can keep it as it is, but we have to make some changes in the use infinite post over here. So we have the two different states, one for page, another one is for post. So here we have to create two more state, which is going to be const loading set loading equals to react dot use state, which is by default it's going to be false. Then right after here, what I'm going to do is, so of course it is going to run into the issue because the infinite post, it's basically returning only these two, so it is going to cause you an error. See on the console, of course we will run into an error, so don't worry about that issue. See, so we can make that issue go away so soon, so don't worry about that. Then right after here, what I'm going to do is const has more set has more, because if it is more data is there, then we have to pull that function, right? So react dot use state, which is going to be initially true. Okay, so we having the data over here fetching, this is the place where we are fetching it. So I'm going to cut it out. Then I'm just going to have that hash more function, hash more. If I do have something, then fetch it, or else return the value URL as null. Okay, so it is going to still be on the 20 only, it is not still going to work it out. So we need to trigger the loading when the page changes. So what I'm going to do is, so right after here, I'm just going to say react dot use effect, open it, have a callback function. Then that if there is a changes, if there is any changes on page, I'm just going to trigger that set loading as what, as true. Okay, then right after here we need to append the new data. This is the place where we are going to append the new data. Here, if I don't have any data, if I don't have any data, I just need to simply return the data as simply, I just need to return. That's it. I don't want to do any stuffs at all. Then right after here, if the data dot length is the data dot here, okay, if the data dot length is, if it is equals to 0, then at that point I don't want to do this stuff over here. So here what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to say set has more as what, false, because I don't have that data anymore. Then I'm just going to say set loading as well as what, false. Then finally I just have to return. Okay, If none of this are there, at this point only, I just need to say set post. I need to update the post. Then I just need to set loading as what? False. So compared to the previous, we made two different state, one for loading and another one is for what? Hash more. If I do have something to pull the record, when I can make sure that there is nothing else to pull it, once the data gives you the length as a 0, which means there is nothing else to pull the record. So that's why we return the condition over here. If I don't have the data also, I need to return. If the data is not there also, I need to set all the state as a false, then I need to return. If none of them are working over at the top, then it's going to set the data into our post. Then it's going to stop the loading state as a false one, because initially it's setting the data as true. So at this point, it will be returned as the false. Then finally, in the return section over here, and what we have to do is, instead of returning the load more, something like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this. Okay, we can delete this. Right after here, I'm going to create a function, const load more is equals to react dot use callback. We can use the callback to memorize that function, because this function is being keep on used again and again, and it's not going to used in the same file, it's going to use in another file. So it's going to create a copy of this function if you not handled it properly. So that's why we are using the use callback hook to memorize the version of that function, right? Then this function is going to collect an arrow function and the dependency injections. Whenever there is a changes on the loading state and whenever there is a changes on the hash more data, we need to call this function, render this function. If it is loading, or if I don't have this hash more, then I just need to return. That's it. If not, then I'm just going to say set page as what? Collect the previous plus 1. Okay, that's the duty of the load more function. Then right after here, what I'm going to do is, okay, here it's not load more, it's supposed to be loading. Yeah, that's why I'm wondering. So loading. So right after here, I'm going to return that load more function. Then I'm going to return the loading state. Then I'm going to return the hash more data as well. As these are the stuffs that is going to be returned from the use infinite hook. Now let's jump into the use infinite scroll. So here we are getting the reference, and inside the reference also, if I don't have that current reference, or if it is still loading, or if it doesn't have that hash more. Okay, so you have to supply all those things. Whatever I'm returning from here, I need to receive it over here, which is going to be loading, which is going to be the hash more. Okay, if any of this are being there, it needs to return. Otherwise, we are calling the handle observer for intersection observer, getting the first entry out of it. Then if the entry is intersecting, and I'm going to make sure it's not loading. If it is not loading, and if I hash more, then only it needs to trigger the on load more. If I don't have anything to load more, I should not keep triggering it. Okay, if you keep triggering it, it is always going to point out the last previous elements only. So there is no possible to move on to the next step, right? So now we have that. Then I'm going to set the threshold into 0.1 itself, because from 0 to 1 you can use whatever the threshold you want. Okay, so I just need to trigger it only. I don't want to see the complete visible. So once it's reached the endpoint, that particular last reference reached the viewport, you have to trigger it. That's why 0.1. Okay, then I'm just going to set the root margin. Okay, so the root margin, so we are triggering, this is the like what to say, once you reach that root margin of the 200, the last reference of that last element, it reaches that 200 pixels or 250 pixels, reaches that particular root margin pixels length, you are going to start the prefetch, right? So that's why we are using the 200 pixels as the, so this is assume this is the viewport. Once you reaches this particular viewport, you should start it, right? So that's the root margin. So that's what we are setting it up over here. Okay, then we are using this observe dot reference current. We are handling the proper cleanup, and if there is any changes on the loading as well as our hash more as well as, we have to trigger this stuff. Then at the end you have to return it. Fine. Now let's jump into the post list. This is the place where we are rendering it, right? So along with this load more, I'm going to collect the loading, and I'm going to collect this hash more as well as, okay, and we will get the last post reference. And for this load more, I'm going to send the loading state as well as into it, loading, and hash more also into it. Okay, now we have the post index, and we are collecting the last index by using that. Then we are getting that reference. If it is a last post reference, use the last post reference over here, then return the null value as well as, then we are simply using this. All right, everything is good. And for this, I'm just going to say font bold. Okay, save it. If everything is looks fine, once it's reached that the last set, see, once the last element is going to reach that root margin of this 200 pixels, that 200 pixels, assume this is the viewport element ending, and this is the 200 pixels threshold. Once that last element is going to come inside the 200 pixels threshold, it is going to trigger that. See, that's why before seeing the 90, I should be able to see the next sets of 20 record. Now once I reach the end 36, 37, see, and 38, 39, 40, before reaching the threshold itself, I can able to see the next sets of data, which means it's working. Cool. Now after the 100, I don't have anything else to display it. So once I reach that threshold at that point, what I'm going to do is, right after here, if it is loading, I'm just going to simply display the text letter as loading more post or something, more post, something like this. Okay, and which is going to be class name. I'm going to keep it the text as the center, text center. Then text blue 500 or something like this. Then right after here, if I don't have the hash more, and then I'm going to bring a paragraph tag. I'm just going to say no more post to load. See, once you reach that, it is going to simply display the message as no more post to load. Let's refresh this. And if you reach the end, instantly the API is been triggering. If there is some lag or not, if there is some lagging on pulling the record from the API, you can see that loading something animation kind of stuff. So that's why you can't see that loading details over there. So once you reach the end, you should be able to see this no more post to load, which means our data, what we are trying to do, the scrolling event, everything is working perfectly. Okay, so let me show you. Currently, if you see the cursor at the right scroll bar, you can see based on the scroll bar, you can I don't know how to show you that, but based on the scroll bar, you can see currently it's initially loading that that first 20 post only. Let me ignore this 200 pixels, ignore it. So 17, 18, 19, once the 20th elements reach inside the viewport, see, look at the right corner. See, once the 20 elements reached inside that, it's pulled that API, so you can able to see that the next 20 sets of data. Okay, so that's the thing which I'm trying to explain over here. Let me refresh it now. So I hope you should be able to see now. See, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13. So 18, 19, we are inside the 19. So currently we don't have anything to display right after that, only one data. So once the 20 is coming inside, you can see it's the cursor has been, the scroll bar has been moved to the top because we have the next 20 sets of data, right? So you can see that loading stuff. See, in between you can see some blue color stuff, something like that, because that's the loading the data which we displayed. So if you want to get the prefetcher, if you want to increase the threshold a little bit even higher, so set the root margin. From the root, increase the margin to the top like 200 pixels, right? From the bottom to from bottom here, it will set increase the 200 pixels top with a certain light like a box. Once the threshold is coming inside the box, pull the data. So that's what it's doing over there, right? So this is the infinite scrolling. And how to bring that lazy loading stuff, because think about it, if it is a really big one, really big API calling and having a bunch of data in it. Okay, so at that point, what you have to do, you have to like what to say, do you have to load this document in the with the lazy loading concept. So how we can do that? So I have to get into the infinite scrolling over here. This is the place where we are bringing it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this post list component, copy this. I'm going to import this post list component, not just like here. I'm going to bring it, the post list is equals to, I'm going to bring the lazy loading. So right after here, bring the suspense, then I'm going to bring the lazy. Okay, import those two things. Then I'm going to get the lazy function, call that lazy function, get the callback import. I'm going to bring that component into here, dot slash, double dot slash component slash post. Wait a minute. The import statement. Okay, let me copy this. Then I can come back to that point. So here I'm going to bring that import statement, import that import statement properly. Okay, perfect. So now we have that. So I don't need this over here. Const post list is equals to lazy import that stuff. Then here what I'm going to do is cut it out. I'm going to bring the suspense, bring it. Then I'm going to bring the fallback fallback, which is going to be a UI. You have to use a different UI stuff for this, for loading. I'm just going to simply say loading, something like this. Now if you refresh it, you should initially you can see the loading, and you can see that data has been pulling back from there top to bottom, and you should be able to see if it is still loading, it will show the loading stuff over here, or it will display the no more post to load over here, right? So that's the beauty of using the suspense and lazy loading with the fallback UI stuff, and along with that infinite scroller by using the intersection observer, right? So I given you the possibility of handling the bugs and understanding the mistakes, what will happen, what's the common mistakes will happen over here. So if you have any questions in this particular point, drop your questions in the comment sections and we are happy to help you out. So I will see you in the next sections with the more interesting concepts in React.